Oh yeah. What to talk about? What is today? What date is it? What date? Sorry? Is it today? Oh my goodness. I thought it was around about now. What is Valentine's Day well known for? It's well known for the Valentine's Day massacre. But not just for the Valentine's Day massacre, for the meaning of like love. If ever you go and visit Ajahn retreat center, you'll find there's 2 Buddhist monuments. They're called stupas. And they are actually sent over when we first built that retreat center from disciples over in Indonesia. They're made from the same stone as a great monument in Indonesia known as Borobudur. And the stupas there, they're replicas of Borobudur, 108% the size of the real monument. And I always remember when I first went there, I saw so many people who weren't Buddhists climbing up that monument, and they're putting their hands in the gaps between the enclosing wall to touch the beautiful Buddha statue which was inside. And then I asked, what are they doing that for? And I was told by the senior monk in the area, they do that because if they can reach inside and touch the Buddha inside, then they will find true love. So if you haven't found true love on Valentine's Day, please visit our retreat center. And sometimes people ask, have you seen any monks putting their hand in there? And I have. Do they find true love? Yes, they do. True love. Loving the teachings of the Buddha. So I remember many years ago, I just gave a talk on the 3 types of love. Do you remember that talk? It was a long time ago. What are the 3 types of love? First of all, there is that romantic type of love which many people seek, and for a lot of that, it actually causes a lot of difficulty and pain. Because that romantic type of love is almost like a chemical reaction. I remember reading an article about it. I was a scientist before. And that romantic type of love is, as this scientist said, please don't be upset about this, but this is a kind of a truth. You don't like the person you fall in love with. You like the way they make you feel. You get high in their presence. It's like a chemical reaction to the pheromones which are incited and given off by people when they fall in that romantic type of love. But that's only one type of love. The much better type of love is like the love if you ever have like a pet animal, like a cat or a dog. And that cat or a dog feels so safe in your presence. And they trust you, and you trust them. And sometimes you've seen these beautiful acts of kindness and love of animals, that they will stay by their masters. The master's injured, and even if they die, they will stay there for long periods of time. I was taken up by one occasion. There was like a parrot at the bottom of Kingsbury Drive, where it meets Southwest Highway. And that parrot had been hit by a car and was dead by the side of the road. But what was interesting was that on a tree above, where the parrot was hit, was another parrot who spent about 3 days without moving, looking down at the injured or the dead parrot. You know that parrots, when they mate for life, and they live a long life. And it was quite clear to all who saw that parrot just staring down at this dead parrot for 3 days. It was mourning the death of its partner in life. Have you ever seen things like that? Even animals have a type of bond and love that they would always look after each other. And to give a AjahnBrahm twist towards this, there was a university in the Northern Territory wanted to investigate why on the major highways in the Northern Territory, why the birds, mostly crows, why those birds would always survive when there was big trucks going past, when there was cars going past, but when the trucks, especially the road trains, started to operate on those roads in the Northern Territory, many of those birds were killed. So what's the difference between a truck and a car? And some very smart students did their research and they found out the reason why these crows only got killed by trucks, not by cars, was because whenever any of them was on the road, eating roadkill, they'd always leave one of their friends, their partners, up on one of the trees overlooking the highway. And then when they saw a car coming, they'd always try to warn their friend, "Car, car, car." But they couldn't say, "Truck, truck, truck." That's my character. I get serious for a while, but I can't maintain being serious. But anyway, to see just that second type of love, which to me was always more beautiful, that kind of commitment. Have you ever seen that? And what does that type of commitment look like? And that is one of the times when it's not sort of two lovers in the sense of two people who are partners, but something much deeper than that. And the best example I had for that was my own father. He had this second type of love for me, which is called unconditional love. Many of you know this story, but it's a very beautiful one. I can't tell jokes about this story, because when I was only about 13 or 14, he took me aside, he picked me up from school. We were having a difficult life because he was very sick and financially we weren't that well off. But then he parked his car, it's an old beat-up old car, and he turned around to me in the car and he said, "Son, however you turn out in life, wherever you go, whatever happens to you, I wanted just to tell you this. The door of my house will always be open to you." And that's what he said. I was a young man at the time. I didn't understand it, except I knew this was something important. His house was a really small council flat in a poor part of West London. It was really small. The place where the two monks reside at night here is about twice the size of the council flat where my father lived. We had some fun times in there though. I remember on one occasion, because I told this story at lunchtime today where we were invited. On one occasion as a young boy, whenever the doorbell rang, I'd always run to the door to open it to welcome anybody who was coming in. But this afternoon, one afternoon, I ran to the door. It was a Saturday afternoon, I remember that. I ran to the door, there were two policemen outside. Two English policemen. And they said, "Is your father in?" "Yeah, he's in the front room." "Can we see him?" "Yes." And I thought, why are two policemen coming to visit my father? And as I was thinking what was happening, then the doorbell rang again. And I ran to the door, opened it, another 2 policemen. This was getting serious. The doorbell rang one more time. And another 2 policemen. Is your father in? He's in the front room talking to 4 other policemen. And then the doorbell rang again. I think there was 8 policemen came. And I thought, oh my goodness, what has my father done? Has he robbed a bank? Has he killed somebody? What's he done? He's a good man. Please don't take my daddy away. And then I got the nerve to open the door and have a look, see what they were doing. Were they interrogating him or what? Then I discovered the reason why 8 policemen had come in to see my father. It was the FA Cup final day in UK. And he knew one of those policemen. FA Cup was like the grand final day. People go crazy about these sporting events. And those policemen were supposed to be on the beat. But then no one was out, everyone was watching the football. So my father said, look, I won't tell anybody. Why didn't you come to my house so you can watch the football match as well? And that's what they were doing, watching the football match with my father. They weren't going to arrest him. If anybody needed to be arrested, as that policeman, they weren't doing their job. But anyway, it's a small place. But I always remember that. Isn't it the case that sometimes things happen in life and you get the total wrong end of the stick and you get afraid when you don't need to be? My father was a good man. No one would arrest him. He was just inviting a few of his friends. You know, you've got nothing to do. It's so safe at that time of the day. Come inside and watch the football match in my house. So anyhow, that his house was small. It wasn't that comfortable. It wasn't a mansion at all. But it was my home. And when he said, son, the door of my house, the small council flat, will always be open to you. Basically, it wasn't offering much. But I realized after many years, that's not what he really meant. Sometimes we want to express something in words. We sometimes almost get it right. We don't totally express what we mean. And I realized what he meant to say. And I've repeated this many times to people. The door of my heart will always be open to you, son. No matter what you ever do in life. And that was the most important part. It was unconditional, open. I was his son, he was my father, that's enough. And that unconditional love is that second type of love. Not the romantic love, but it goes much deeper than that. Hopefully, when a couple meet, and eventually that love can turn to that second type of love. You look after each other. You care for each other no matter whatever happens to you. The unconditional part is the most amazing part. But it goes more deep than that. Because I often say, when I understood what my father was actually saying, and trying to practice the best he could possibly do, I realized I had to say that to each one of you. I don't matter what you get up to, what you do. I try to make that gesture to each one of you. The door of my heart will always be open, no matter what you ever do in life. Even if you do some terrible crime and you go to jail. I went to jail many times to visit prisoners. And I always remember that, to tell those prisoners, I don't know what you did. I do care, but it doesn't bother me. Each one of you I see inside of jail, you're my friend. The door of my heart will always be open to you. And it's wonderful, the effect that has. And that's just a monk. Imagine that, your partner, your parents, your friends, your children, when your children grow up and they say that to you, ooh, that's amazing. But one of the most amazing times, and I hope each one of you actually do this, it's not just smart words, it's actually meaningful words. For you to stand in front of a mirror, alone, look at yourself, and say to yourself, me, the person who bears my name, the person I've been with and I've known since I was born, this little girl, little boy I grew up with, me, and the person I'm with right now. I don't know what my future is going to be, but me, whatever it is, I promise, the door of my heart will always be open to me, no matter what I ever do in life. That kind of love and acceptance, unconditional. You can do that to yourself. Many people have. I've done that to myself. Just stood in front of the mirror. AjahnBrahm. Sometimes I tell terrible jokes when I shouldn't. Sometimes mean jokes. Some of the jokes I've said, people, you can't say that. But I did. The door of my heart is open to me. I have to live by example. That's a beautiful healing thing. Many of you feel guilty about something or other. There's some parts of your life you never thought you could be possible of doing, and you're ashamed of them. You don't need to be. I'm being honest there. You know that once, not far from here, there was a lady. She wanted some counselling. She wasn't even a Buddhist, but she was somebody who respected Buddhism. So when she asked for some counselling, I would give her counselling. She was dying of cancer. And then one day, just in the office over here, I said to her, I thought she trusted me enough that she would be kind of compliant. I wasn't trying to cheat her or control her or anything. I asked her, in all your life, what's the worst, most immoral thing you've ever done? And she wasn't expecting that question. What's the thing which you're most ashamed of? If I asked that question to each one of you, what would you say? Don't say it now, please. And when she told me, she was a Australian woman, maybe in her 60s or early 70s, and she said, the worst thing I've ever done in my whole life was I kissed another woman's husband, just once. And I looked at her, is that the worst thing you've ever done? I said, yes, and I was so ashamed of it. That's pretty good. If that's the worst thing you've ever done, my goodness, you're almost like a saint. And I meant that. And then she looked at me quite surprised. She never said that to anybody, what she'd done. She managed to keep it a secret. And once she actually told me, it was like a big burden was released from her. She didn't feel so bad. Yes, she made a mistake. But honestly, if you take a driving test and you just make one small mistake, does that mean you don't pass the driving test? If you're doing the exams to get into university and you make one small mistake, does that mean you're not a good candidate to go to university? If you make one mistake, if you make no mistakes, that's weird. If you make one mistake, that's actually pretty good. That's what learning is all about. That's one of the reasons why one of the jobs I had when I was young was a school teacher. And that's when I learnt about exams and testing people. How do you set an exam? And that's when this senior teacher told me, don't make it too easy. Don't make it too hard. Aim for the average result of 70%, 70%. Because if your kids, they're only like 14-year-olds or 13-year-olds, if they get a very low scores, giving exams in mathematics, in maths, if they get a very low score because you set the exam too hard, then what would happen to them? they go away thinking they cannot do maths. And as a teacher, that's not what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be encouraging. You can do it. Keep on going. You can do it. You can do it. But if you make it too easy, so everybody gets 99%, 100%, it's not really an exam. What use is it? If it's 70% average score, number one, they realize they can do maths. And number two, it's where they make mistakes. That's their feedback to me, their teacher. I need to focus on their weak points indicated by the exam on the next lessons. And when I heard that, it made so much sense. That 70% is the best score. Not just in exams, but in life. The last week, if you gave yourself a score, what would it be? It would never be 100%. If you're 100%, you're just in denial. You all make mistakes. I make plenty of mistakes. That's where I learn. And if you just learn from the mistakes you make, you know the meaning, the reality of mistakes. You don't have to be perfect. And that's even these days. When people ask me advice on all sorts of things I know nothing about, honestly, even, somebody was asking me, they were overhearing a conversation I was having in Bodhinyana Monastery with a woman who was suffering. And they said, why do they ask you about all these problems of marriage and relationships and raising kids? I've been a monk over 50 years. I've never been married. What do I know about raising children or marriage? Do I know anything? Actually, I do. So much so that's why people ask me to do their marriage blessings. I'm very popular doing marriage blessings. I think it's because I'm very cheap. But not just that. Is because you know how to learn and grow. And so to this day I tell people, if you're looking for a partner in life, choose a guy who's 70%. If he's 80% or 90%, he gets so arrogant, a pain in the butt for you. If he's 40%, he's stupid. So get a guy who's about 70%. Same if you're looking for a female partner in life. Don't get some supermodel. This is what somebody once told me in Singapore. If you marry a supermodel who's really gorgeous, you'll be so jealous you won't have a happy, peaceful life at all. Marry someone who's actually 70%. Then if they're 70%, you can go out to see the football match or any other thing which boys like. You don't have to worry that somebody's going to run away with her. But if she's really gorgeous, you'd be worried so much. So guys, never marry a beautiful woman. Women, never marry a rich man. If you marry a rich man, you don't know what he's up to. He's got enough money, he can hide anything. Is that good advice? And that comes from a monk who's never been married, okay? But on that subject, I don't mind mentioning it now. Once over in, of all places in Malaysia, in Kuala Lumpur, we did a little retreat, a one-day retreat, for young people. And by young, I meant between the ages of 15 to 25. And there were a lot of Buddhists over in Malaysia, of that age. We wanted to support them and help them. So how can you sort of help young people and have a nice, beautiful, happy life? And of course, one thing that all young people are concerned about is not just passing exams, It's also like, finding a partner in life. So we split them up into two groups, male and female. And then we asked, first of all, the females. The men, you have to stay quiet. We asked the females, what type of girl do you get attracted to? What type of woman would you like to go out with, and especially eventually to marry? And all the boys were really listening. It's one thing which no one had ever told them, not from the girl's perspective. Other boys would say all sorts of crazy things. You've got to be tough. You've got to have a big motorbike, fashionable clothes. You've got to be able to speak really cool language. I don't know, but no one ever told me what I should do to attract girls. That was very fortunate, because I was going to become a monk. But if you're looking for a nice boy in life, does the boys know what attracts the girls? And what they came up with is about 40 or 50 of them. They discussed the question, and they said, what really attracts us to a boy is, number one, that they are trustworthy. Number two, they're relaxed and happy. Number three, that we can rely on them. And they're clean. Little things. No one ever told me that when I was young. And I said, what, you want them to be? They want to be moral. They didn't like them getting drunk. And so in the end, they came up, well, what really attracts you to boys is boys who keep 5 precepts. I said, yeah. They're trustworthy. They're moral. They don't let you down. So, what type of boy would you like? One who keeps 5 precepts and makes you really attractive. Then the boys were really surprised by that. So then it was the boys' turn. What type of girl attracts you? You know what they said? Samma. What does that mean in Bahasa? So in Malay? Same. So the boys wanted a girl. They didn't have to look so beautiful, but someone who was fun to be with, they could trust, rely on, somebody who was clean, somebody who they could have fun with, joy and easy going. So that's actually where we learn to the power of things like keeping 5 precepts. I shouldn't say this, but I love saying it, is that all the monks we have at Bodhinyana, when any one of those decides to disrobe, many of the girls here get very interested. Honestly. There's not that many disrobe, but about 2 or 3 of them did. And they get married, usually to one of the women here, surprisingly. And they come up to me afterwards, the women, and they say, "Thank you so much for training my husband." Have a think of it. You stay monastic life for 3 or 4 years, you learn how to cook, wash dishes, to clean up after you, and they keep precepts. They're very easy going. So please keep your eyes off this one. No, he's not going to decide. But I don't know if you know that, was it today or tomorrow? Tomorrow, his ex-wife, Anoma, she's having an agaric ordination at Dhammasara. She's going to become one of the members at Dhammasara. That's wonderful. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. We have a couple of other monks whose wives eventually became nuns, or the wives ordained first and then the husbands followed afterwards. It's kind of a tradition even in Buddhism. Anyway, that beside the point, I never actually... Oh yeah, that lady who said her worst fault was that she kissed another man's husband. No, that's wrong, is it? Another woman's husband. What time is it? I'm getting tired. She felt so guilty about that because she didn't want to tell anybody. Just when you tell somebody, you realize a lot of things you worry about are just really not that bad. When you keep it to yourself, that's when you exaggerate it and it becomes enormous. I've noticed that fear exaggerates the truth. And I mentioned that, I think, to the monks. I hope it wasn't last week to you. That time I was meditating in the jungle. When I was meditating in the jungle over in Thailand, I knew there were some very dangerous animals there, including tigers. I remember asking Ajahn Chah, are tigers dangerous? He says there's no evidence that a monk has ever been eaten by a tiger. And my first thought was, the tiger wouldn't confess, and the monk would be eaten, so he couldn't say what happened to him. There'd be no evidence left at all. So I didn't trust that. I always thought if there were tigers around, maybe they can eat monks. That's one of the reasons at that time, believe it or not, I was very thin. I thought that could actually save me. The tiger would take one look at me and said it's not worth it. I actually was thin in those days. Honestly, I've got lots of evidence. I've got some of the photographs. You've seen some of my old photographs in Thailand, really thin. But anyhow, so sitting there quietly, meditating, this is actually how your mind works. It was dark, you couldn't see anything. And in the beginning of the night, when the dusk made the whole forest really pitch dark, that's usually when many of the animals sort of stopped moving around. Any which were left were the big animals who moved so quietly. And I was sitting there quietly, and I heard the sound of a little animal coming towards me. And what would you do? You're alone in the jungle. You got no one to call, no way to defend yourself. So I just listened carefully. Is this a small animal or a big animal? It was certainly coming in my direction. And I concluded, by the way that it crushed so many of the twigs and the leaves on the forest floor, and the way it just moved past some of these branches, it was a big animal, not a small one. And I started to get scared, honestly. And then as it came even closer, the way it again crushed the twigs and moved past these trees, this was a big animal, a very big animal. And I got so scared, I came out of my meditation. I did have a flashlight, and I moved the flashlight around, looking for where the tiger was. And the more I looked, I couldn't see any tiger. Then I saw this really tiny mouse. Honestly, fear had made a tiny mouse sound like a tiger. And that was a great insight. Sometimes what's happening to you, sometimes a little problem in life, because of fear, it turns a mouse into a tiger. A little illness, like this is going to kill me. A little cyst becomes a cancer in your mind. And it's a fear which does the worst to you. So I always remember how a mouse could sound like a tiger in the darkness when you're afraid. So also just how when you're kind to yourself, and even you're kind to animals. That's the other thing which I've noticed in years and years and years in Thailand. Because there's many wild animals there, and you were out there in the bush. Even here in Australia too. That kindness, how it protects you. I was kind of surprised, but pleasantly surprised. When my preceptor, he was like a city monk. He was actually the head of one of the Buddhist universities over in Bangkok. But nevertheless, I remember that time he told me about his training as a young monk. he had to learn meditation too. And one of the meditations he did was in a coconut grove in Koh Samui, which is a resort island now, but in those days it was just an island, hardly anybody lived in it. That was his home. And he said one day his meditation was really deep, and when he came out of his meditation and opened his eyes, he could see there was a snake coiled up in his lap. It's a very venomous snake. And he was one of those snakes his parents had told him, and teachers, be careful of this snake, it's really dangerous. And it was actually on his lap. And he said the weirdest thing about the meditation was when he opened his eyes he had zero fear, but so much kindness. This poor little snake, just happily just curled up in his lap, just resting. Just like sometimes, you have a cat in the house, and the little cat just curls up in your lap. You don't want to move, simply because you don't want to disturb that cat. You have love and kindness towards that cat. And that was the same feeling he had towards a venomous snake. He said that was the most strangest experience. And did that snake take advantage of him by biting him? Of course not. He just sat there for a few minutes longer, and eventually that snake uncoiled and slid peacefully away. There's so many stories like that I've experienced in my life as a monk. So many that these days you're not so afraid of animals like snakes or tigers. Once I came almost face to face with a tiger, a big one. He was only just a few feet away from me, being honest. But amazingly, I wasn't at all afraid. There's no fear there at all. It was in a zoo, and there's big bars in front of me. But I felt sorry for the snake, and to be in a cage. But snakes, big snakes, yeah, it seems so many of those. And because you have a natural form of kindness and love as a monk, you always keep saying the door of my heart is open to you. As long as you keep the door of your mouth closed and don't bite me. And it's wonderful, just when you have that type of kindness, that type of love, then you have so much peace and happiness in this world. No one actually hurts you. Sometimes I wonder. I wonder that, when I was really young, did I have that kindness then? Was I born with some of this? And these days I think probably I was, with an excess of kindness. Because I remember just the teacher in my last grade at primary school, he was so fierce. He would spank anybody, but he never spanked me, even though I was naughty sometimes. And I wondered why later on. And also, I did remember that towards the end of my school year, I was always doing well. And that was the time my father had a day off work in the afternoon. And this actually ties in with something I was saying about him earlier. He loved watching football matches. And so at lunchtime he said, I've got the afternoon off work and I've got these 2 tickets for a World Cup qualifying match at Wembley Stadium, England versus Poland. Please, I apologize to any Polish disciples here. We always have a few. Anyone from Poland here? There's a couple, I can see you over there. But anyway, so I said, I'd love to go, but I've got school this afternoon. So I went up to this teacher, who was a tough disciplinarian. But again, he had some respect for me, I don't know why. And I asked him, I said, sir, my father's waiting outside of school, he's got these 2 free tickets to go to this football match this afternoon, can I go? And that's a ridiculous thing to ask. And I don't know why, but he looked at me and was surprised I had the nerve to ask. So he said, okay, off you go. So while my friends were studying in school, I was at a football match. It was amazing he could allow that. But he did. And by the way, I think England won 2-1. It was a long time ago. But no, those kind of experiences, because you had kindness when you asked, love if you like, I saw the power of that. Now that's only 2 types of love, the opening the door of your heart. What's that third type of love? It's a great thing to say at Valentine's Day. This is that deepest type of love. You're all interested now, aren't you? And that deepest type of love was actually, what they say in tennis matches. The love is zero, nothing, emptiness. And to understand what the meaning of that is, that's like le, French. It's supposed to be egg, but in England they transform that and an egg is round and it's like a zero. That occasion, just whenever in a deep meditation or life, if any of you ever go and visit, say, Ajahn down in Albany, his monastery is on the edge of Australia, 500 meters from his border. You have the Southern Ocean. You can stand on the cliff and look, and there's nothing between that monastery and Antarctica. And it's nice to sit there or stand there and watch. There's nothing there. Emptiness as far as you can see. There's something beautiful about emptiness. And that simile I gave a couple of weeks ago, when I was young, went over to Central America and managed to find my way to one of these old ruins in Tikal in the Yucatan Peninsula, these big pyramids they had in the jungle. And I always remember that because I did not know what they were there for. I did no research, I just went there. Hardly anyone was there, and I walked up one of the pyramids. There was only one person there. There was no security, no guarding of anything. I walked up the top of one of these pyramids just to see what was up there. And when you got up to the top of these pyramids in the Yucatan Peninsula built by the Mayan civilization, when you got to the top, you were above the tree line. You were above the jungle. And as I love saying, for the first time in days, you could feel the wind. It just blew unimpeded over the top of the jungle. It was so cool and refreshing. And number 2, whichever direction you looked at, north, south, east, west, you saw space in all directions, with nothing between you and infinity. And the spiritual connotation became so clear to me. We have religions, even like Buddhism, and sometimes that puts things between you and the infinite. And this is actually everything taken away. You can see forever. Like without anything blocking you from seeing infinity in all directions. Seeing emptiness, nothingness. The greatest act of love is that space. And if you want to know how to experience that emptiness more and more, sometimes people keep asking that. They say, when we start meditating, we keep thinking about things. How can we sort of get away from that? Easy. The next time you come into this hall, I want to ask you, when you come in, don't look at who's here. Don't look at the things, the chairs, the Buddha statue, the monks or nuns in front of you. Instead, just look at what's between all of us. The space, the emptiness, which embraces and unites us all. Look at the space. Then after a while you can start looking at the space, between your thoughts and experiences. The emptiness, which is so much more than things. I try and emphasize that by not having too many things on the shrine. But when I'm gone, a lot of people keep putting things up. Just like, in our main hall in Bodhinyana, if any of you have been in there, there's hardly any knickknacks on there. The shrine, we try and keep it as empty as possible. And the reason for that, because we're worshipping that emptiness, that third form of love, of nothingness, which surrounds us all, embraces us all, unites us all, and connects us all. Sometimes when we do these Buddhist conferences, I remember doing one over in Singapore, and we went out into the Straits of Singapore, we just put some holy water in the ocean. So please remember, this ocean is not what divides us, it's what connects us. The Indian Ocean, the Southern Ocean, the Pacific Ocean. This is what connects so many millions of people around the world. It's not what divides us, what connects us. We're looking at life in a totally different way. And that great space, which embraces this whole planet and connects us to the rest of the universe, is huge. How come people don't see it? We always think we're separated, divided, we're alone. Of course you can never be alone. Each one of you is connected through the beautiful emptiness, the nothingness. So anyway, I told the monk today, if I speak too much, please throw something at me. What can I throw at you? Nothing. Thank you for listening. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. That's my Valentine's Day talk to you. Sometimes I get into trouble on Valentine's Day. I still remember over in Singapore, my MC on this talk one evening said, there are so many people in Singapore, they're too busy to get a partner. So, can we just start off with just, all the people in the hall here. That was a big talk over in the Taipei Center in Lavender Road. And all the people who are single, please put your hand up. And I'm always very obedient, so I put my hand up as well. And she said, AjahnBrahm, put your hand down. You may be single, but you're not available. I love messing people up like that. So how many people are single here today? How many are available? Don't put your hand up. It's nice having fun together by telling silly jokes. And sometimes that's what people remember after the talk. They don't remember much which I said. They say, what did AjahnBrahm talk about tonight? Nothing. Correct. Thank you. So questions, here they're coming. Okay. How many questions we've got today? We've got 3. As I understand who I am, or what am I am this empty process called the 5 khandhas, or the 6 sense spaces, or impermanence, suffering and non-self. Could you elaborate on this? No. That's one thing I always encourage others to do. Have the freedom to say no. If I elaborate on it, that sometimes I fill you with my understandings of this. They may be very right, but they're actually all the work which I've done over this life. Just how the Buddha taught. I remember one of the things he said which really impressed me, that I'm here just to show the way. You have to do that work and walk that path yourself. And that's one of the reasons why sometimes, even senior monks have big arguments. Empty process, 5 khandhas, or the 6 sense bases of impermanence, suffering and non-self. Do you know what impermanence means? It's a nice word, you think you do. But if you really understood what impermanence was, you'd be enlightened. Same as suffering. Do you know what suffering is? If you did, again you'd be fully enlightened. Non-self. How many believe you're not there? Is there a self inside of you? Understand what that means? Yep. You do? What does it mean, Eddie?
Oh, it's emptiness, you know.
Emptiness,
yeah. There's no, you know, it's like a river of flowing water. It continue, you know. I think the 3 characteristics: it's impermanent, it's no self or emptiness, and suffering. As you say just
suffering.
Now. Yeah.
Do you want to get reborn again?
No.
No, okay. But a lot of times, you know, when you hear these things from others, it's not really good enough to get fully enlightened yourself. You need to experience these things. It's in the experience, not the hearing, where these things actually become really powerful. Like impermanence, it doesn't mean just impermanence. It means things actually vanishing completely. That's why the best simile which I constructed was again a simile. You've heard it many times, those who've been here many times. But please, when I repeat a story, remember I have heard it more than any of you. And that is the story of the tadpole and the frog. Tadpole cannot know what water is until it becomes a frog. It's born in the water, lived in the water all its life. But once it becomes a frog, it can jump out of the water. And once it jumps out of the water, it knows that this water is that thing which has now disappeared, which has been impermanent. Now it can know what it is, or rather what it was. That's like when you jump out, metaphorically you don't leave your body vanishes, and you're still aware. When the body has vanished, now you know what your body is, or rather was. That's one of the other questions they got here. How do you lose the fear of death? One of the ways is when you get into a deep meditation. Your body is gone. The 5 senses have turned off. No seeing, no hearing, no smelling, no tasting, touching. But you're perfectly aware. More like alive than you've ever been before. And the 5 senses are not there, the body's not there. And that's when you get these beautiful, weird experiences, which I love talking about. These are real, I don't make these up. When people get into these deep meditations, you can't hear sounds. One of those occasions was this little novice. And it's interesting how he got into this deep meditation. Ajahn was giving a talk in Thailand. A boring talk. No jokes. It was really boring. And this novice, it was late at night, and said, "You should be finishing by now. You know, when are you going to stop? When are you going to stop?" And that became a repeated phrase in his mind. When is Ajahn going to stop? When is he going to stop? When is he going to stop? When is he going to stop? And then this little novice turned it around. He was getting so tired. And he said, "When am I going to stop?" And that's when the novice stopped. His mind went perfectly still. He went into these deep meditations. He knew he was in a very deep meditation. He hadn't fallen asleep. Because when he opened his eyes, after his first deep experience of meditation, it was the early morning. The monks had got up and left. They'd finished the talk, they'd bowed, did some chanting, and gone. He missed his morning alms round. And he was blissed out all this time. His first deep meditation experience where the 5 senses vanish. He could do that. Now he knows what this body is. It's not as important as the mind. So you never feel afraid of your body dying, because you know what it feels like. It's wonderful. Especially when many people die, it's because their body is old, it's hard to work, it's suffering, it's worn out. This is like an old car. Honestly, how many of you, if you had an old car, beaten up old car, which is really hard to maintain, how many of you would keep it? Or how many of you would actually trade it in and get an upgraded new car? If you knew how. How many of you have got an old body, worn out, difficult, lots of appointments at doctors and dentists and surgeons? I know some of the people who come and tell me they spend most of their life going to doctor's appointments and tests. When you get that old, wouldn't it be lovely to actually, metaphorically, to get a nice new car? Why are you afraid of death? Especially if you're living a good life. Every path, every religion, I know this is true. If you lived a good life, when you pass away, you'll have a wonderful sense of freedom and peace. Why be afraid? If a doctor came up to me and said, AjahnBrahm, I'm terribly sorry to tell you this, you've only got 10 days to live. And I'd say to him, can you make it 3, please? And I mean that. The head monk in Malaysia many years ago, he was the one when the doctor told him his disease is terminal, he burst out laughing. And that really shocked everybody. Why are you laughing? It's going to be free. If somebody announced to you, and they were a prisoner in jail, in 3 days' time, you're going to get a pardon, be able to leave the jail, would you be happy? I'd expect so. Once you know what prison is, what freedom is. Anyway, dear Ajahn, how do I meditate when I cannot breathe freely because of a tumour? I am short of breath. How can I be kind to other irritations? How to find peace and be at ease? Okay, you're asking that question which was answered very beautifully by that person who came on one of my retreats in Sydney many years ago, who had a sinus cancer. And he wasn't a Buddhist. He just came to this retreat because he had heard that maybe meditation can get rid of cancers. So he came on this 9-day retreat. He was meditating, making all this noise. And people complained until I made the announcement to everybody, that fellow is dying of cancer, a sinus cancer. That's the only way he can breathe. And he followed the instructions beautifully. The reason was because he had to. It's amazing when you know you're going to die soon. That really gives you a lot of motivation. They don't mess around with it. They're practicing meditation when they're in that condition. And of course, many of you know the story. After 9 days, he was getting nowhere, still making a lot of noise. But then I was already packed up, ready to go, and he came running after me, and he said, Brahm, I need to tell you this. So what happened? He said, the last meditation. Now, it's always the last meditation when these things happen. So if you ever join a meditation retreat, just come for the last day, okay? That's a joke, okay? I know the bookings managers over there should be scowling at me. But this is what happened to him. The last meditation, he heard a popping sound. It's a popping sound story. He heard his popping sound, and he could breathe through his nose for the first time in months. Imagine how excited that would be. You're not imagining it, you can actually feel it. And he said after the popping sound, then the tumour closed up again. He had to breathe through his mouth again. But it was so exciting, I told him to carry on. And then I went to the airport, he carried on. And then it was only about 6 months later, another talk in another venue in Sydney, and this guy came up to me, and he said these things, please don't ever say this to me. Do you remember me? Honestly, I meet so many people even in 1 week. And even just sometimes I give these big talks, like in Sri Lanka in BMICH, about 5,000 people, actually more than that usually. And somebody comes up to me, this Sri Lankan, oh yeah, I saw you in BMICH, do you remember me? Of course not. And so this guy came up, do you remember me? I said, of course I don't know. That's the thing with being a monk, you're honest. I don't mean to offend, but I don't remember you, who the heck are you? And that's when he told me, I was that guy with the sinus cancer. And I carried on what you taught me, and many pops later, he was in full remission. And of course you don't remember, but anybody who's really close to death, they lose all of their muscles, and they become really gaunt and thin, and that's you can't remember anybody when they're that sick. But now he had fattened out, he looked really healthy. He said, thank you. And he said, I asked, what are you doing now? He said, I'm spending the rest of my days teaching other people to do what you taught me, to meditate. Well done. It's wonderful when you see things like that actually happen. So if you can't breathe freely because of a tumour, if that's the case, you're still breathing, just you can still relax. It's tougher for you, but the incentive is also much stronger. Stay in this moment. Don't actually even think of even 1 moment into the future. Stay right here. Make peace, be kind, be gentle. You'll be amazed at what's possible. You experience it yourself. Can be done. I've seen it done. But thank you for the question. Okay, is there any more questions? I have to be 1 minute. Okay, start. Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
In the world we live in now, Ajahn, there's so much selfishness and turmoil. People can give up more love, kindness, understanding, okay, which the world could be better. The world could be a better place.
Of course, yes. And each one of you will feel that joy as well when you're kind to others. And today especially, Valentine's Day. That's a much more pure meaning of what love is, what we should be celebrating. The kindness to one another. How many of you have not made any mistakes so far this year? We've only had not even 2 months yet. Crikey. So none of you are perfect. Agreed? So kindly forgive each other. And it's easier to see other people's faults. But if you look at your own, and I'm only 70%, that's what AjahnBrahm said, so that's not bad. Maybe you're 80%, that's really incredible. Well done. Don't expect to be perfect. Expect to be free. I'm very free. Don't charge at all. That's why people exploit me. Is that true? Yeah, see. Any other question before we finish off? Going, gone. Oh, it worked. Thank you. So I wish you a very happy rest of the Valentine's Day.